Welcome to our pod, and by that I mean on Wednesdays we read. I'm Hannah,
I'm Laura.
and we are two best friends who do a deep dive into a new book series, one book at a time. Right now we are investigating the Dublin Murder Squad,
The Dublin Murder Squad.
and we are finishing up the characters and themes of Faithful Place.
Faithful
Not
Place.
to be confused with A Faithful Place by Tana French. But Laura, before we get into how destroyed we are by this book, what are you reading, watching, and or enjoying?
So I've mostly been reading podcast books. We have an upcoming.
No.
we, I went and looked online, and I was like, "What have I been reading?" And then I was like, "Ah, yes, Faithful Place." I've been reading "To Shape a Dragon's Breath" by Moniquill Blackgoose. So look out for that episode coming.
Super
Uh,
excited in a week from when this
yes,
episode is released.
I will say, just like I have some thoughts, and they're mainly towards the fans of Monoquill's of this series, the Peshaways series. Why have you not created charts, people? I am so disappointed that this fandom has not gone online and made charts and a bunch of different fan arts of all of the dragons, because there's so much world building in this, and I really just need the graphics. I need the graphics with all of the different dragons and what they look like. I need to see Copper and what Copper looks like. I need to see the dragon that Copper is supposed to be mated to. I need all of these things, and they're not
Especially,
online for me to visualize.
so sorry to everyone who we're gonna have to ask Monoquill all of these like questions next week,
Yes, and
but we are
mostly,
trying to
why are
get
your
you
fans slagging?
to read this book before next week. All of the dragons, like this gives me such big throwbacks to when I was younger and it was like, here's what this dragon looks like. And I'm like, I
Hmm.
want drawings of this. Who
Hmm.
is drawing this? Because like I want to know what Anarchus's dragon looks like and how she looks like a weasel. What does that mean? Please show it to me. And you just can't, you don't get to see it as much.
It is. So I will say, like, I'm able to visualize the sizes a little bit better than understand, like, it's hard for me to remember some of the colors, I think, is
Yeah.
what I'm struggling more with, like knowing the Anacus is like looking up all of the different breeds of the dragons and everything, and then saying, oh well, that's this one and that's this one, and I'm like, wait, what one is it? Anacus, slow down. I didn't read the book. I need you to what was it again? And so I'm used to being able to go online and just type in, like, say it's Legendborn wiki, and there be tons of info and fan art and everything, or go on Reddit and type in Legendborn, and there be lots of fan art. For whatever reason, it is a crying shame that the
It is a
fans
crying shame.
have not
Monoquill's
held up their end of the deal and made fan art. And I'm like, do I have to be the one that goes back and creates terrible fan art so we can get this ball rolling?
We do need people to do that for us. High school seniors who are a little bit angsty
Where
and love
are you?
dragons, please do this for us.
Dragon Rider book, come on, get on board. So yeah, I'll have to bring that up with Monaco, that I'm quite disappointed in the fans.
What a great way to get people to read the books.
I
So,
will say, the excellent world building. I'm really enjoying the book. I think it's great. So yeah, I am kind of a sucker for Dragon Rider things. I love the Aragon stuff. Love Of Blood and Fire, Ryan Cahill's works. So I am a sucker for a Dragon Rider. This is Indigenous Dragon Rider. Of course, I was going to be on board.
Indigenous dragon rider who walks into every event like, this means nothing to me. And everyone's like, it's very important. And she's like, I don't care.
And they're like, you should be thrilled to be here. And she's like,
Could you just teach
this
me
is
how to use my
stupid.
power so I can get out of here and go back home?
You realize I'm just humoring you. Please get me out of.
In the second book, not to like no spoilies, but like in the second
Uh-huh.
book, at one point, someone was like, you do realize you've told every single newspaper out there that your entire plan is to get away from society and just go back to your
Obvi.
island. Like,
Grandma said right from the beginning, this is bad news, and we should have been listening. Ah, sorry, Grandma, we were not listening to you. But I do think that Hannah and I are really like downplaying the complexity of this book, though, that it's actually very deep.
oh yeah.
And we will definitely talk about that with the author when we have her on. But yeah, it's a great book and gets into so many themes. So yeah, please be looking out for that bonus episode coming out on the 28th, I believe.
Mhm.
And we'll be talking about the second book as well that comes out on the 27th. So be picking up the new book and listening to our episode on the 28th, which we'll talk about the first two.
Ooh.
So yeah, I've been reading that. I've also been enjoying playing some board games. I've been taking A Gentle Rain with me to work and playing that during my lunch break. Uh, it's been a delight to do that. I eat lunch and then I play A Gentle Rain and listen to my audiobook or uh, read my book a little bit afterwards. But yeah, it's been a delight. I love that. And then I also have been playing The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, the trick-taking game. I still think the name is too long, but it's a delightful game to play solo. And I can't recommend it enough. Just I have a weird obsession with that game and I don't know why. It's not that complicated. It's a typical trick-taking game. I just think that it's so accessible and it comes in a beautiful package and the art is so beautiful that it just really draws me in where it's like this is a great game for people who are not used to playing a lot of board games but maybe have a little bit of knowledge of cards of some sort where I'm like this is a really good entry game into board games if you are wanting to get more into the hobby that it's fairly cheap to get the game. I think it's only like $25. So
Okay.
yeah, it's just a really fun game, and I really enjoy it solo. That it's a really good trick-taking game for solo play. I've also played it with my husband. That's the only ways I've played it is two-player solo, and fun both ways. But I've mostly been playing it solo lately, and I just love it so much. It's so pretty. And then I've been watching some movies lately.
Oh,
I watched Knives Out.
love it.
Finally got to these movies.
You had never seen Knives Out yet?
No.
Oh my
So
goodness, Laura.
Netflix has been advertising the Knives Out series of movies because the recent one just came out. There's three of them now.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I kind of want to watch that one, but I want to be a completionist and watch the other ones. So I watched Knives Out, really liked it. I think if you're fans of, at least for me, it was very reminiscent of Agatha Christie, where we have
Yeah,
this
I think that's very fair.
notable detective who swoops in and is somehow always placed in the right moment at the right time and is able to piece together what has happened in this mystery that is weirdly random things that you would not have put together but somehow should have guessed. It like I thought it was just a lot of fun and I really liked it. I thought that the way that it was acted was really great. We have like all-star casts in this. I
Oh
just
yeah.
think they don't hold back on it. They're like, you know what, we're doing this. It's going to follow a typical formula, and we're going to get awesome sets. We're going to get the best cast that we can, and it's going to be really good. And they did all those things. So I really enjoyed Knives Out. My husband and I also watched The Naked Gun.
Oh good. How was that?
It was so stupid,
So
but
stupid.
but also that's what that movie is supposed to be. It's supposed to be incredibly stupid. There, I think you can just watch like the short preview that they give you of the movie, and it tells you everything you need to know about what you're getting into before you watch it. Where it's like, I am shaking my head so much, rolling my eyes, but it is fun. You can't deny that it's just absolutely ridiculous, and it is something though that I feel like they have so many one-liners that you almost don't have time to laugh because you're like you need to pay attention because you're gonna miss something. And also they had Liam Neeson drinking so much coffee in that movie, which is part of the gag, but I thought it was quite funny that he's just constantly being handed coffee and he's chugging it or throwing it away and getting a new coffee and everything, as cops are known to do. It's just very funny. But yeah, it's just bizarre and ridiculous in the best way. I found it very funny at times.
Oh
And then
good.
the main one that I should probably talk about is I watched Begonia.
Oh, how was that? Weird? That's what I feel like I've gotten from
Yes,
that. It's a weird movie.
yes, but
Okay.
captivating,
Okay.
captivating. I I hate to spoil anything about it. I think people should just go watch it. It follows two men who are conspiracy theorists who are convinced that a woman who is a CEO of a large pharmaceutical company. They're convinced that she is an alien
Oh,
and that they
oh,
need to capture her and
okay.
they need to uh, essentially get her to reveal herself as an alien before an eclipse.
Okay.
And so they go forth and they kidnap her, and it is it is a really intense movie,
Okay.
but it's incredibly well acted and also devastating. And I did not expect what was going to happen in this movie. I was very, very surprised because it was really getting me at one point where I was like, wow, this is getting rough. I did not know what I was watching here, and I was just like, ah, this is pretty devastating, especially considering our current political climate and the way that
Mm.
people have become conspiracy theorists. And so it was getting pretty rough to watch. And there is a big twist in the movie that I was very surprised by. So,
Okay.
so they got me. They got me good. And yeah, I did really it's hard to say like, oh yeah, I really enjoyed this movie about this really difficult topic. I did enjoy it, and I think just based on the fact that they were able to pull this twist on me that I was like, oh, okay. I I think that made me enjoy it more. I don't want to give away too much besides that if people want to go watch it. I will say you need to be probably in the right mindset or look up some trigger warnings regarding kidnapping and just trauma, abuse, those types of things before you watch this for sure, because it handles a lot of very heavy topics, even some that are just lightly touched on. It gets very, very rough. But
Okay.
I thought it was a really good movie. I really liked it, and I get why they're hyping it up so much. It was really pushed online to me, like, oh, you should watch this, you should watch this. So finally I was like, all right, Emma Stone, I'll watch you. Very good movie.
Not enough fans. Emma Stone. I'll be one of them.
I guess, Emma Stone, you need some support. You're just a struggling actress. I'll help you. But yeah, very, very good movie. I would recommend it if you're in the right headspace to handle a lot of the heavier topics that are covered in
Okay.
it.
Good to know.
Yeah. But Hannah, what have you been reading, watching, and or enjoying?
So for reading, I finished the Heart and Mercy series recently by Megan Bannen. The Undercutting of Rosie and Adam is the third one in this series. As a reminder, the other ones I read were The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy and The Undermining of Twyla and Frank. These books are very cute. They're very romantic-y, very light, very fun. And they all kind of have like different things that go into them. Like the second one was about older romance. The first one had a lot of like familial problems and like, the positions of family and things like that. The undercutting of Rosie and Adam. So this takes place in a world where demigods are kind of just like everyday people.
Hmm.
And sometimes, if you are a demigod, you get the gift of eternal life. And Rosie is someone who cannot die, and she's been
Okay.
around for hundreds of years. And she has a very tumultuous relationship with her father, who is the god who, gave her this gift, really. Um, and she's kind of like at the point in her life where she just doesn't want love anymore because she has had it before and she sees everyone die. And I think a good thing is like it would be very easy to treat a character like this as someone who's like, I just want to die. But Rosie very much loves her life. She just also recognizes in context, like each part of her life is a very short amount of time for people and she will be around for a very long time. So she is blasé about like, oh, I got struck by lightning and I died. Whoops. But like she also very much cares about building a home that she loves and doing these things, doing work she values and just kind of having to live her best life. And then she finds herself in love with a short king named Adam, who is coming to help fix this portal that takes people into a like God-like area, and they get trapped there with some characters that we've met in prior books. And, romance ensues. I really liked this book. I think it was actually my favorite of the series just because
Sounds fun.
Rosie, it really was. It was just kind of a delight to read. And it doesn't like hold back from trauma or like looking at like what it means to live forever, but it also is just lighthearted and it's people that you love being with. And Rosie is a tall redhead similar to me. And she has like her quote in life is something I often say, or something similar to what I say is like, um, don't worry about it. This won't matter in 50 years. And I do think like I'm often someone who's like, okay, you can't worry about this because no one's going to be thinking about this in like 20 minutes.
Hmm.
And she very much lives that life. And it was just very cute. It was very cool seeing there was a lot more of the like mythology in this book than the other two, which were a little bit more lighthearted. But this one seems to like come full circle on everything that was built before it and everything up till now. And it was a good time. And it was the third in the series. There are no more so far in this world, but I do think that a lot of people like these books. There actually is fan art of these books. So it's fun to pull that up and see it. And also fun to see like a tall woman and a short man because I
Hmm.
love that kind of representation. So I listened to that book
You're
as,
giving me vibes of like Frieren before Journey's End, the manga that I like,
oh yeah,
where I think
maybe.
I've read 4 or 5 volumes of it, where it follows an elf that's part of this, like kind of a D&D like troop,
Yeah.
where the rest of her crew has all kind of become deceased because she's outlived all of them. She's an elf and she's just kind of wandering around and trying to figure out like, what do I do now? Why am I so old? Things don't really matter in the same way to her as they do to other people, but she still cares and helps people. It's a fun manga.
Yeah, I think that that's very similar. So, very similar vibes. Definitely
Mm-hmm.
recommend this series if you're looking for some lightheartedness. And it was good in audiobooks, which I got all from
Okay.
Libby. So, like, definitely recommend the audiobooks. I think that they all work well together.
Okay.
Um, and this one, yeah, I just really liked the mythology. And then I also listened to Wayward by Amelia Hart. Lots of people love this book.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It's been on a lot of people's favorites list.
It is a very beautiful cover. Like it has like light green
There's like a
covers. It
bird
has,
on it, right?
yeah, it's a crow on it. And this follows three different women who are all waywards. And it kind of is surrounding this cottage that they've all, been around or been surrounding. We have Kate, who is a woman who is escaping an abusive relationship in 2019, and she finds out she inherited this cottage from her um, great aunt, and she goes to live there, and she starts kind of finding weird things about her family. We have Alta, who is a girl on trial for murder of a local farmer. Everyone thinks she's a witch, and she's from 1619. And then we have 1942 Violet, who is the great aunt character growing up in her family's grand estate. And throughout the entire series, like it says this on the back, so it's not a spoiler, even though it's like all the wayward women are witches. Like, and so it has a lot of magical realism of like, hey, is magic
Mm-hmm.
happening? What's going on? There's a huge discussion of women's rights for bodily autonomy in this book, and using like, the mythological or um using like Wiccan things or like herbs and things
Mm-hmm.
like that to talk about how women could carve out their own independence in times like this. It does go deep. Look up, there is some sexual assault in this book that
Okay.
is pretty much on the page. So definitely be careful if that's something that you're thinking of right now. But it goes through a lot of it. I thought the book was good. I didn't love it as much as other people have been loving it.
Mm-hmm.
I do think part of it is a little bit of my review was skewed by something I recently saw on TikTok, which was someone talking about witchy books like this and how often they don't go that far. Like, it's like, oh yeah, it's witches for like the second wave feminism people who don't really like want to delve in too deep to
Well, as you're
these.
describing this, I was like, ooh, practical magic vibes.
Yeah,
And that's probably all it is. You know what I mean?
yeah,
It,
it's very practical. And like, there is discussions of like abortions in England when it was not,
mm-hmm,
viable or not
mm-hmm,
legal. And so I don't want to say like this didn't go anywhere, but it just felt very second feminism. Like, and no book has to be a monolith. No book has to go into
sure.
everything. But like, it's very much about the perspective of three white women in England.
Okay.
Um, and so I think that kind of kept me where I was like, I think this book very much wants to be a feminist novel, but like it didn't go that far for me. So it
Mm-hmm,
didn't hit me as hard as I think it's hit other people. But I do think a little bit of that was like something was brought up to me right before I read this book. And I was like, huh, that's true. And then this was the first book I picked up after hearing that. And I was like, huh, they didn't go far enough. You're right.
That can happen and kind of cloud your view sometimes, I think, of a book.
Yeah, and so I do think it was kind of clouded by that, but I like certain elements of it. Again, like I'm seeing a lot more books where women are into sciencey things, and I do
Dig
like
it.
that because I dig that. Like Violet is someone who loves science. She wants to learn biology. She wants to learn all these different things. And she's kind of kept in a world that isn't valued about that. And the other thing that was really weird about this book was again like the second feminism way of it all, where like all the women were like I will never birth a son. And I was like, well, why? Like, you could only birth daughters and like you don't want to build a better world for every. It was just
I
very
mean,
strange.
you could raise good men. I
And like
that
there
that
there
is
is
an option.
a good male character in here, but like there's only one. Like so it's just
Interesting.
very funny.
Okay.
Um but yeah, so there are certain things, but like I don't know. It was good. I'm not saying this is a bad book by any means. If someone was
Hmm.
like, "You hated this book," I'd be like, "I gave it 3 stars." Like
Okay.
I gave it the same rating I gave Dune, guys. So like just remember that.
That is not a glowing review. Pick another book, Hannah, to as a 3 star. You have a
Um,
long history with
no, that
Dune.
one, I mean, that's mostly for the bit. I have gone on record that I did enjoy Dune when I read it. I think people gave me a bad rap, and now it's just for the bit. So, but yeah, those were 2 books that I read both via audiobook. I have been reading more physical books, but they are the books for the podcast. So
Mhm.
we don't need to go into them as much because we're going to do a deep dive into Faithful Place anyway. So,
Mhm.
and then for watching, I recently watched I've been going into a little bit more ghosty flavors of
Okay.
television and movies. I'm terrified of ghosts, but recently
You watch so many ghost things, though. Of the
I've
two of
gotten
us, you watch a lot of ghost things, and I love how you're always like, "I'm afraid of ghosts," and you like talk about something, and I'm like, Hannah, you were drawn to ghost things, but you're
well, it's one of those where
afraid
you're drawn
of
to the
ghosts.
things that you fear most, but I wouldn't the problem is like recently my sister-in-law was like, I love The Haunting of Hill House. And I'm like, never in a million years would I go near that television show. I would start crying. Like there's something about a
I
haunted
like
house that
that
I'm like,
show
I'm sure it's great. I think I would cry the entire
quite
time
good.
I was forced to watch it. Um, and then there's another one that the same creator created, The Haunting of Hill
Uh-huh.
House.
The
And I was
Haunting
like,
of well, that's the same show that you just mentioned, The Haunting of
oh, sorry. I was
Blythe
thinking
Manor or
of,
something, I think,
yeah,
is
Blythe
what it is.
Manor. I was like, I would also cry during that television show. But I remember this movie from when I was a young child of watching it, and it was a ghost movie. And I actually watched the whole thing, and I remember it terrified me as a child. And then I watched it as an adult, and I was like, that was really stupid. And I knew it was going to be bad. It's called What Lies Beneath with Michelle
Okay.
Pfeiffer and Harrison Ford. This came out in 2000. It's like a supernatural horror thriller. And it starts with like Michelle Pfeiffer and Harrison Ford, who is just mumbling through the entire movie. Like,
That's what he does.
yes, but this was even worse because we started it and I literally paused it and I said, I have to add captions because I do not understand what he is saying.
You know, I got captions on all the time.
I usually have captions on. It wasn't on for this movie. And I was like, ooh, brother, buck up. Like, no, we're not doing this.
Uh-huh.
So, like, Michelle Pfeiffer is this person who's like her daughter is going off to college. Uh it's Harrison Ford's stepdaughter. She recently was in a car accident and it freaks her out. And then the next door neighbors are in like a volatile relationship and she thinks that the next door neighbor is like abusing his wife. And then she goes missing and she's convinced that the wife
Mm.
is dead and haunting the house.
Hmm.
But then the wife shows up, and so we don't know who actually is haunting the house. And is it somehow tied to her recent accident and how weird her husband is? We don't know. This movie was made by Robert Zemeckis, who also made the great films like Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Forrest
That's
Gump.
why I recognize him.
Yes. And he actually filmed this movie in between filming Castaway. So, like, because apparently Tom Hanks had to lose a bunch of weight. And so instead of being like, oh, well, I can't, like, you'd still have to pay the crew while they're waiting for Tom Hanks to
Hmm.
lose all the weight. He was like, I'll just film what lies beneath. That's what he
Random.
did during this time. And it's so funny to watch. It's so weird to watch. I heard, I don't know if this is an urban legend, but I think I heard it on Blank Check with Griffin and David, where like Michelle Pfeiffer and Harrison Ford were like, I'm not flying to the other side of the country to make this movie. So they just had like random sets built on the East and West Coast to like film random parts of this film because like neither one of them wanted to be around. I don't know if that's true or
What
not,
like
but like
spoiled people? Good Lord.
I know. So like this was a wild movie. There are so many moments where like my sister-in-law and I were watching it and she was like she could like she kept being like, "Well, ghosts aren't real. So obviously I'm going insane because that woman can't be missing." And it's like you could still do a wellness check on her. Like she
Right.
still is very much missing from the household. So like
Mhm.
why because you're seeing her quote unquote ghost, you think you shouldn't report it
Sure.
is wild to me. And then like she is too trusting. She's just kind of like in the middle of things. And we're like, there are so many questions, Michelle. Why aren't you getting out of the house? And she just won't do it. So that movie was insane to watch as an
Yeah.
adult person. And then I recently started watching season 4 of True Detective. So I've seen the first and second season. I skipped the
Okay.
third season, but I've heard good things about the fourth season.
Hmm.
This has Jodie Foster in it.
Hmm.
Um, True Detective is an anthology series. Have you seen any of the True
No, but
Detective?
I've like revolved around it and thought about
Okay.
watching it.
I really loved season 1. I thought season 1 was very good. Season 2 was wild and I don't understand why any of it existed. And then
Okay.
I have no idea what happened in season 3, but season 4 seems to be very good. It got really good reviews, so we kind of came back into the world recently. Um, and it follows Jodie Foster and Callie Rice, who is a former professional boxer, and it takes place in Alaska, and it follows an investigation into a disappearance of a team of 8 men from a research station. And
Okay.
surrounding this is a recent or a murder that took place a few years ago of an indigenous woman up in Alaska. And it's really good. It's called Night Country because it's during like the Alaskan time when there's no daylight, so all of it takes
Hmm.
place during the nighttime. Um, and it has
Cool
a lot of
concept.
like, it's a really cool concept. It's really cool because you have like Kelly Rice's character who is pointing out things like, oh, we only care about this murdered woman because like the case was had kind of gone cold. And all of a sudden these 8 men go missing, most of them white. And she's like, oh, so now that case suddenly matters again,
Hmm.
even though there was this indigenous woman. And she's very, like, she cares very much about the culture of Alaska. And Jodie Foster cares a little bit less. And her stepdaughter is indigenous. And like, so there's a lot of
Hmm.
push and pull there. And so it's a very interesting. I'm only 2 episodes in. I'll keep you guys posted on how it's going so far, but there's so much happening. Like there's
Hmm.
so much plot that there were like Aunt Petunia from the Harry Potter movies is in this. And there are so
Hmm.
many moments where we're like, Petunia Dursley is somewhere. We forgot about her. And there are like weird like ghost things. Like in the first episode, the woman who played Petunia um is following this man without
Fiona
sh
Shaw.
Fiona Shaw. Thank you for looking up her name. I
Yeah, I looked
appreciate
up her
you.
name because I was like, excuse me, this is Madame Andor. How dare
Okay,
you?
perfect. Fiona Shaw, like in the first episode, is following this man without shoes on, and this is not a huge shocker. But he ends up being a
Mhm.
ghost. Like the entire time, we're like, why is she following that ghost? That's creepy. And he leads her to a bunch of the dead bodies, and it's like really weird and visceral. So like, it's very
Okay.
moody. It's a really good concept, and they're doing a lot of good stuff with it. And so I'm very interested to see where it goes because there's only 6 episodes. But the first two, like, so much has happened. It's even hard to keep track. So can't wait to
Well, that
check
sounds
in.
interesting. I've been seeing like True Detective and Mayor of Easttown like online for the longest time, and I know both of them I would enjoy. I've just
Yeah,
never like settled down to watch them.
that's fair. Mare of Easttown is very good. So,
Hmm.
and then my sister-in-law wants me to watch Midnight Mass, which is by the creator of the other two Scary
Yeah, The
Ghost
Haunting of Hill
shows.
House. Hmm.
Yeah. So getting into my spooky era with the and it's also very nice to
Yeah,
watch True Detective Night Country during like it's been snowing for three
January.
days up in
Hmm.
Wisconsin, and so there's like it's spookier and a lot is going on.
You're
So
getting the vibes everywhere.
I'm getting the vibes everywhere, Laura. I'm even getting it when we read a book like Tana French's Faithful Place. beautiful
Sad.
transition into this devastating novel.
Sad.
Yeah, I don't even know where to like. I guess we could talk about Frank because he's the main character, but it's so
Hmm.
hard to talk about Frank because I think like once you start talking about Frank, you want to talk about Holly and you want to talk about
Hmm.
Shay and you want to talk about Carmen. You like everyone is just so intertwined with him in this novel. I do think it's good to talk about like the fact that you called this the lit fic one because it is about the tragedy of this family.
Hmm.
And it just that's such a good way to phrase it because this is about the tragic movements of a family who is just trying to deal with an abusive parent the best way they know how.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that even though this is a mystery series, this is a mystery book. I very much right away pegged it as that, as the lit fic book because of that family trauma and the drama surrounding this family.
Yeah, I think that that makes sense. Um, and I know this book really resonated well with you.
Oh, I loved it. It's
Um,
my favorite one so far.
Can you tell me a little bit about like highlights for you of what made it your favorite? I think that that would also be something that we don't talk about very often on the
I mean,
podcast, but I'm
I
very interested.
I think mostly the lit fic of it all. I am a sucker for family drama, a sucker for, and when I say a sucker for, this maybe is a white woman thing of being drawn to trauma, unfortunately, in this specific way of like depressing, like childhood trauma and family traumas. I don't know why I'm drawn to these types of storylines. I just am. I think also just a lot of the things that happened in this family, I was able to connect with just by knowing people who have had similar situations growing up. So I think maybe a lot of that played into why I thought this book was really great because it seemed like representation of things that I feel like aren't talked about a lot, if that makes sense. I know we get representation of abusive families and things like that, but I do feel like we don't often see adults who are having to work through a lot or see adults on the page or in media that we as viewers are recognizing the trauma that they have gone through and that they're having to face up to some of these
But
traumas or ignore them and push past them, what have you. So I thought that it was just really great in terms of the portrayals, and I really appreciated how none of the character none of the characters were really villainized for their viewpoints or the ways that they felt because everyone was truly a victim in
yeah,
their situation growing up. I get it that we know at this point now that Shay was the killer. Shay was the person who was victimizing others who did many bad things, but Shay was a victim himself. I appreciated that portrayal too, that we knew that even though he had done horrendous things were done to him. And I think that I really appreciated just the way that the author made it a little more gray
yeah.
and that it wasn't in the last couple, it was a little more black and white, a little more, well, this person is clearly bad.
Psychopath.
Yeah. And this I felt was a more realistic portrayal of how some people are led to violence and how the things that affect us are a lot of times the things that we grow up with, the things that shape us are our family and the situations that are out of our control, like income, housing, things like that. And so I just thought it was a really, really good portrayal, especially like given our current climate where so many people are struggling with financial security and housing. We're going to likely see a lot more people struggling with these types of things. And I just
Yeah.
thought it hit me hard for just the time that it was in, just being able to see a portrayal like this, seeing adults who were working through trauma in very different ways. And also I just appreciated the way that French really tied in the importance of a place. It's called
Hmm.
Faithful Place, and they really talked about home and the things that you would die for and how they were all very much connected to this place, but didn't want to be there, had very complicated feelings about it, but would honestly probably die for it or ruin their reputation in order to, or lie horribly in order to protect the reputation of the place. So I just thought it was a very well written novel. It was just very good. To me, it was much more of a lit fic and a family drama than it was ever a mystery.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to talk about the fact that these are adults who came from a home that had an abusive parent in it, because I also think a lot of times what we see in literature are people who made it quote unquote out
Yeah.
and they're no longer connected with that family member, or the family member is dead, or like there's a certain sense of we made it out. And I do think
Hmm.
this was a unique portrayal of it because it looked at a type of family that very much exists, which is we all still live with the abusive parent. We all still know what they
Yeah.
are capable of, but that doesn't mean that they A can do that anymore because the dad can't really physically do that, but his
Hmm.
trauma is still very much integrated into the family and he still is abusive verbally and emotionally, but they all still know that they're going to take care of him and they're all going to make that sacrifice for their mother who doesn't want to leave him, and because that is technically what they were raised to do. And I think that that's a very unique experience to write about. And I
Hmm.
do appreciate that Tana French wrote it with an air of like sympathy towards someone
Yeah.
who would choose that and not saying like, well, they're
I
idiots
don't
or they
even know
should,
if I
like,
can, it's
yeah,
more empathy,
yeah,
honestly, than sympathy. More, I could, because that's the way I felt the entire time reading about these characters was that French really attacked them from not thinking like we feel sorry for these characters, but that we understand and feel with them. We feel
yes,
for them, and I just really appreciate that because even when you and I have in previous episodes talked about the sibling dynamics and how well it's not fair of this one or that one to feel this way, I feel like you can still see the way that French has written all of the siblings from such as and the parents as well from a standpoint of we understand. It
yeah,
doesn't make the things that you've done or that have happened right, but we understand. We don't feel bad, but we understand.
right. And it is interesting to kind of watch that dynamic play out in this like lit fic version of Frank at the end. I think he did the right thing for him because he loved Rosie and he wanted to do the right thing by her. But at the same time, like he did end up ostracizing his entire family from himself because Shay was the family member who they all relied on and who did a lot for the family. And so by removing him, he did hurt the family at the end. Like it did hurt them. It hurt them with their community. It made, and like it made it so Frank wasn't even welcome back to that community anymore. And
And
so
it's so interesting too, considering this from the standpoint of Shay was going to leave,
yes.
that he is considered to be removed via Frank, but he was planning on leaving. He had
Hmm.
that poor man had wanted out from the time that he was a little boy. And by the time he was finally going to get out, it was at the point that someone was removing him in a way
Yeah.
that was unfortunately awful. But Shay doesn't get the blame in the way that he might have had he just picked up and left.
Hmm.
So it's interesting that we're able to place that blame then on Frank, who's
Yeah.
really seeking justice for his former girlfriend. And it's really interesting when we consider that he was going Shay was going to leave. There was
Well,
still
but
going to be this
also
hole in this
he th
family.
he thinks he's going to leave, but we actually don't know that. Like he's talking about it, but he's also been talking about it for years. Like
Hmm.
the reason Rosie died was because Shay thought he could leave, and he heard that Frank and her were going to get out, and it was Frank's turn in his mind. And I do think Shay very much believes that the only reason he didn't get out was because Frank left.
Hmm.
But at the same time, Frank may not have taken care of the family the way that Shay thought he should have. Frank is a different person than Shay was.
It's
So,
interesting when we're talking
yeah.
about things like this because I think that you do have, especially amongst large families, you do have siblings who feel a stronger obligation towards
Hmm.
certain things within a family dynamic. And there are often siblings who feel a stronger obligation towards caring for their parents.
Yes.
Or, and a lot of times I do think that that falls on eldest siblings
Hmm.
to be the caretakers for the parents when they grow older. Or in a situation like this, I do think a lot of times parents will lean on an eldest child
Hmm.
when they don't have support from a partner. And that is not fair to children. I am often frustrated by parents who will say things like, "Oh, that's why you have lots of kids so the older ones can take care of the younger ones." That's very frustrating to me,
Yeah.
especially as someone who deals with infertility, because it just seems very unfair that that's your reason to have lots of kids so they can raise the other kids. You don't have kids to raise other kids, in my opinion. You That's not a reason, and you shouldn't have kids to take care of you either. That seems very selfish in my mind. But anyways, I all that to say that it does play out in an interesting way when we're talking about like Shay feeling more obligated to stay and
Yeah.
at the same time desperately wanting out and thinking, well, Frank should step up. But you're right, he might never have been there in the way that he wanted him to.
Yeah. Because I do think that I mean, I talk about that not from this standpoint, but from, I know I'm a controlling person in some ways where I'm like, I have to do it my way. Where like I've taught myself from a young age, like I'm the first to say, like, if I give you a job, that's your job now. That's not my job. I do not get to criticize how you did that job because I didn't. And I think Shay would have been someone who was like, I did this better. You should do it. Like he was that way with Kevin, where Kevin
Hmm.
was making decisions that Shay didn't agree with, and Shay couldn't handle it and was like sitting in a corner chastising him in a way that I think was very reminiscent, and not to say like Shay was abusive, but like it's very reminiscent of the way their dad treated them, of like putting them down and like doing all these things. And I do think in Shay's mind, he was helping Kevin because Kevin just wasn't being the adult he saw him as. But it's just, it's an interesting dynamic to see play out because I do think it was easier for Shay to blame this on Frank than and it speaks well to Shay, and it speaks to some issues of like he couldn't just leave it all behind the way some of the other siblings did. He
Hmm.
couldn't walk away from that because he did care for his parents. Where like Frank and some of the younger kids were more willing to be like, well, this is what mom wants. Like, yes, we can be there in some way, but we can't fix this. And I do think that that would have held him back in some way, or could have potentially held him back.
I do think too, in Shay's mind, a lot of him and his siblings, like his and his siblings, the static there comes from a place of him feeling that he took on more.
Yes.
And a lot of that is jealousy and also trauma. I would be curious to know the statistics because you said that he takes it out on Kevin and Frank. I'd be curious to know the statistics of if it's a thing that eldest children who, kind of of step in the way, to protect younger siblings or what, or parents, if they have a history of them becoming abusive in some way, shape, or form to younger siblings, even though it may not necessarily be physically all the time, but just taking
Right.
on that. I would be curious to know those types of statistics because it does seem like some of that exists here in a verbal way for sure.
Yeah.
But I do think a lot of the dynamic between him and especially his brothers is
Yes.
that he feels that he was forced to grow up
Yes. Oh no.
earlier,
Like
but
us saying, or me saying it's complicated isn't even me saying like, because he was forced to, and he probably did take on more than his siblings did.
mhm,
Like that is the
yeah.
truth. A huge part of the reckoning, especially with like sibling dynamics like this, is like, yes, I took on more, but it still didn't mean that what happened to them wasn't awful. And I think that that's
Oh yeah,
sometimes the
no,
line of Shay is like, well, I took on more, so what you guys took on was nothing. And it's like, well, that's also not true. And that's Carmen had
sure.
that come up its moment where she was like, I didn't realize that in my mind, you guys didn't have it hard. And then I recognized that you guys did have it hard. It just wasn't as hard as what I went through. And it's like, oh, that is very true. Like both of those
Yeah,
things are
it's
true.
very much everybody's dealing with hard things in their lives, and the level of hard, if we increase everybody's increment, it doesn't mean that it doesn't take away from one person's hardship. It just means that everyone's dealing with that same increased increment of hardship.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it for Shay is, never dealing and coping with getting help for that trauma and the things that he
Hmm.
was going through made it was almost like a blindfold for him, that he
Hmm.
couldn't see that the younger siblings in his family also had things that they had to deal with that were very difficult. And I think you think, just if you're in that situation like Shay, you think that, well, I had it hard. So you guys don't even, you had it like a cakewalk. It's one of
Yeah.
those grass is always greener situations
Hmm.
where you're looking at your own life, and he obviously struggled a lot with the way that his life had gone in a direction that he was not happy with.
Hmm.
So he could look upon his younger siblings, especially the one who left and was able to become a successful detective and everything, and feel a lot of jealousy and bitterness for someone who seemingly got it all and didn't have to deal with the same things growing up.
Yeah.
So everyone's a victim in this, unfortunately. No one in this situation didn't have a level of trauma.
Right.
There's so much that happened to all of these people, but I do think in terms of Shay, I'm trying hard to describe what I feel like the author is trying to depict here, in that he was almost blinded by the trauma that he didn't deal with.
Yeah. Oh, and I think that that's 100% true. And it's also heartbreaking because, like, Shay, when he's talking to Kevin in the bar about his life, Shay's right. Like, he's right. During the time of this book being written, we were about to hit a very big recession worldwide. So, like, Kevin probably would have lost his job. Like, Shay was right in a lot of ways of, like, I was about to get out. I could have had better opportunities. And, like, I was robbed of those opportunities. And we do see that. So he's not wrong. It's just one of those where, like, because he's in so much pain, because he's had all this trauma, he can't see it in other people or let it go in certain ways because he's still very much stuck in it and he's still very much doing what his mom needs him to do. And that is very heartbreaking.
Hmm. Yeah. How did you feel about the mom?
I, it's very frustrating because I'm reading her and I read a very real person. Like, there is a person out there who was with an abusive husband and who still thinks that it is a huge win that she did not divorce him, that she kept her head down and made her way through it, and she never got divorced, and all of her children are less than who did need a divorce or who are living in sin, and
At least
who,
she can still receive communion, you know?
yep. And, like, even when she's talking about the next door neighbor who, like, when you find out what happened to Rosie's mom with like with Frank's dad, it is heartbreaking, you know. And even the story of, like, he very much believes Rosie's dad is the one who made him who he is today because he took that job away from him. Well, that's not true. You had other options. You just didn't take that, you know, like, and alcoholism is a real disease. Trust me, I know. But,
Mhm.
like, there is that sense that Frank's dad blames the world for his alcoholism instead of his own demons. And it is sad. Like, but that's a very tragic story about how Rosie's mom was kind of ostracized in the neighborhood because she was seen as this ruined woman, and she ended up getting married to a man who, like, it seems like they have a good marriage, but also kind of weird that he was that controlling with his daughters.
Mhm.
And their mom is just like, well, they were just jealous because she couldn't have more kids. She could only have two. And you're sitting there like, this is heartbreaking because you're just not very, it's one of those, like, very Catholic guilt moms. And it's frustrating to read on the page because you just want her to get help or to get the freedom she wants, but she also doesn't want it. So, like, you can't do anything about it.
You can very much see the ways that Catholicism and her community have shaped her opinions.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts off rough when we hear, that she's much younger than him and that she entered into a relationship with him when she was very young. And So I almost get the impression that this is somewhat of a situation where he was a good-looking guy. She thought she was getting a prize and that she was doing well by getting with someone who was good-looking, who was desired in the
Yes.
community. And she feels an immense obligation to remain his wife because
Hmm.
of her religion and because of fear of what the community will think of her if she leaves him.
Yes.
And my thing is, your safety is more important than communion.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I do think there are lots of people who stay in abusive relationships for a variety of reasons. I don't know that I would consider their marriage to be one that, even though they say, they all love each other, I don't know that I would consider this one that I feel there's a lot of love there.
Yeah.
It seems like there's this we have an obligation to each other.
Yes.
We have an
Obligation.
obligation to our community. We have to maintain face. We can't, yeah, we can't break up our family, those types
Yes.
of things that
Well,
seems
and
very
also
unhealthy.
there's also that other aspect of it, of the money of it all. Like they don't have a lot of money. The dad did drink
Mhm.
away everything. And there is that sense of like, well, there's enough money to drink, but like we have always lived in this bedsit. We've always lived in this
Yeah.
house that is not big enough for the family size that we had, but it was good enough for us. And there is like a deep-seated like resentment of people who want more than them or who got attained, a better standing. Because I do think sometimes with Frank, that's a lot of it
Oh,
of like,
yeah.
you think you're better than us. And there's this internal resentment of it. And then this like other side of, but you're not better than us because you got a divorce and you did these things. And there's a
Mhm.
big like gut reaction of I might feel insecure about something or I might feel bad about something. So I'm going to lash out because of all these other reasons. And I did get that sense a lot from his mom of like,
Mhm.
well, Rosie's parents put on heirs. They're not better than us. We had more kids. Like, how dare they? They didn't.
She likes to kind of spin things around to make it seem like their family has a moral superiority,
Yes.
where even though it's like you could say, oh, well, that you're living in poverty. Well, we we got by with what we had. We didn't
Mm-hmm.
take on too much and we didn't need too much, is kind of the
Mm-hmm.
thing that comes out. Whereas, her family was considered to be privileged. And it's unfortunate because it's like, they could have used more money. The
Yeah.
system was working against them. Unfortunately, they also had a bad situation with their father being an alcoholic and not
Mm-hmm.
being able to keep jobs. So that didn't work out for them. These things could have been helped if they would have been able to address the alcoholism and also would
Mm-hmm.
have been able to be more financially secure
Yeah.
to help address the alcoholism too. So yeah, I do think there is very much a flipping of the situation to make it seem like they come out with some kind of moral superiority,
Right.
but it's based on the terms of how do we view ourselves via
Mm-hmm.
our perception of Catholicism and also via our perception of what the community standards are.
Yes. And I do think that there is a small portion of that like Tana French does a good job of saying like, well, both and because like his family is like that, but also when he goes and he talks to Olivia, his ex-wife, she's like, well, I never judged her family, and he's like, but you did, and you know you did because you were relieved that you didn't have to interact
Yeah.
with what you saw as trash. And it's a moment where she's like, well, I thought it was easier at the beginning. And I do think Tana French in that moment is saying, like, she's doing the same thing too. Everyone thinks
Hmm.
that they are morally superior to other people. It's just what they've decided to judge someone based on. And
Hmm.
Frank is very much like, well, you loved me because I was a cop and I had my stuff together. But if I wasn't, I wouldn't have been worth your time. And like, that is
Yeah.
something that eats at him a little bit. And he thinks about a lot because of where he came from. And he worries about that with his daughter, where he wants her to have a better life, but he also wants her to not look down on people or, and like he wants to protect her in any way he can, but he also recognizes where he doesn't want her to be like too good. Or when her friend says that like people without money are trash, he's like, well, we're not going to do that. Like he wants her to
Hmm.
be a good person at the end of the day.
I think that brings up like a really interesting conversation too when we talk about like Olivia and then Holly too, and Frank thinking about like the types of people that you want people to be around and everything like that. And also our perceptions of others because I struggle with this a lot. It's something I talk about in therapy that I've always struggle with recognizing that people don't have a lot of empathy for other people until they're put into a situation where they're forced to have empathy for that group or person. So, like in my mind, like let's just say the chronic illness community, like I'm someone who lives with chronic illnesses, and I often struggle thinking like, yeah, people don't care about people with chronic illnesses. And they don't care until they themselves have one or
Hmm.
they encounter someone close to them that has one and they're personally affected by such things. So I think it's interesting when you're talking about like Olivia and her view of this family because she does kind of come off that way where it's like, oh, I care about people who live in poverty. And yet she conveniently removes her and her child from being connected
Hmm.
to people who are living in poverty because oh it's fine. He doesn't want us to have to get together, and then also doesn't consider the situation any deeper, but then you're still dealing with a situation where Frank has to weigh out the ways that he wants his daughter to grow up
Yeah.
and wants her to remain in safety, but at the same time, how do you balance that with trying to raise someone who has this type of empathy for other people who are different than you, that live in poverty or that are different skin color or different
Yeah.
like physical ability or developmental ability? How do you do that unless you interact with them? Because we do gain empathy for others by experiencing others.
Right.
So it's a really fine balance and really interesting, I think, when we're thinking about those two, because Olivia is a privileged person who
Yeah.
I think probably likely does care,
Yeah.
in her own way, but is she someone that's going to go out of her way to interact with people who are poor? Unlikely.
Yeah.
And she didn't for a very long time and didn't want to understand the full situation of Frank's family.
Which is hard because Frank also has a reason to want to keep Holly
Hmm.
away, and
Hmm.
no one was listening to him. And like that gets into the blind spots or the morality discussions of like Jackie didn't tell Olivia why Frank didn't like their family. Because to Jackie, it was like, well, I don't want to share our family's business. But it's also like, okay, but you are bringing your brother's child into that when he didn't want her there. And
There's
yeah,
also a bit of, I don't know how to describe this, but in families where there's a lot of trauma or abuse situations, I do feel like there is a bit of obliviousness that
yeah.
exists within these families where they recognize that they have an abusive father. However, if they are ever in any kind of situation where someone were to ask them about like, oh, wasn't your father abusive, they would deny it. They would be shocked that someone would
Hmm.
say something like that, like, what, we have a loving family, we're wonderful, we do great, what are you talking about, we'd love to have her over for Christmas.
Hmm.
Those situations are very interesting because I think when you're in them, you often don't recognize how bad things are. And I think that in my mind was a little bit of Jackie, where she doesn't recognize that this might be an unsafe family situation for her niece to come into, or
Yes.
why, or the reasons why Frank doesn't want Holly there. And she sees it more from the standpoint of, well, he just thinks he's too good for us and wants to keep her away, like the rest of the family kind of thought of Frank. So it's tragic in itself that she can't recognize that they have a very rough family situation.
Hmm. Yeah. I do think you're right that like it is that, well, it's not that bad. Our family, or it
Mhm.
used to be bad, but now dad can't hurt
It's a
anyone,
lot
so
better
it's so
now. He
much
only
better.
just yells.
He and it is sad because like that I think that was the hardest part, other than like obviously the abuse, but I think you and I both were like, that's a huge violation that Jackie did that, like
Yeah.
didn't tell his wife about it, or didn't, like was just like, oh, it's all happy-go-lucky and it's totally
hmm
fine, like don't worry about it. You're just sitting there like, Jackie, that was not good, like what were you thinking?
I
um
think in the same way that people have a tendency to think that the grass is always greener, we also have a tendency to think that our own situations are better than they actually are. That happens all the time where people think that, oh, well, it's not that bad yet. I don't need to see a doctor yet. I don't need to see a therapist yet. I
mhm.
don't need to get help for my house, the state of my home yet. I, and usually it's fairly, we're fairly off in the ways that we perceive ourselves, whether
Yeah,
we are over the top in terms of glamorizing or making things seem worse, I think.
yeah,
It's hard to give accurate self-evaluations.
I would agree with that.
And even harder, I think, when we're looking at our families and trying to analyze the dynamics there because there is a shared trauma, there is a shared love for each other that is difficult to explain and difficult to admit if there are bad things happening.
I definitely agree with that. Um, it's so hard because like this book was so much about Rosie, and I feel like we didn't really talk about her much, but it's also because like she is the wish that got away from Frank. Like she was like his happiness and whatever innocence he had left, and then
It's
she
really a
died.
book
Yeah.
about lost love in
Yeah.
general, where we see Frank has lost his love, Rosie, his chance to get away from Faithful Place. And he does, quote unquote, get away, but he never truly gets away because she keeps him tied there.
Yeah.
And we have the lost love of Shay, who is never able to get away from Faithful Place. His love is to leave,
Yeah.
to his love of finding something better for himself. He's tied to Faithful Place. They're all tied to Faithful Place, and they've all lost something, and a, a desire, I should say, whether that be
Yeah.
love or a desire for a career or a new home or wealth.
Yeah.
And it seems like none of them are able to achieve that. So it's really tragic. And Rosie's involvement in this is so unfortunate because you know, I don't know that we learned too much about her family situation, but I think we can assume that she did grow up in a healthier family situation than the Mackeys.
Definitely healthier than the Mackeys. Still a little weird how controlling her dad was, like the like
hmm
taking her keys away or doing the, like that
I think
was,
also though some
yeah,
of that though it seems like of the time those type of
that's fair.
things may have
Like back
happened,
in the 80s, like your
70s and 80s.
-year-old daughter, like
70s and 80s it seems like type of things that maybe like a little bit overbearing parents were doing where like you didn't have phones and stuff, cell phones and stuff back then, but you needed a way to make sure your daughter wasn't sneaking out. Well, we're taking your keys.
yeah, but
That
like she was an adult. Like that was the part that got me on this reread because I think when I first read this, I was pretty young,
mm,
and I remember reading it this time, I was like, she was 19 when that was happening. Like that is
that's
wild.
still a
Yeah.
teenager. I feel like a lot of parents, especially with daughters, are still holding on pretty tight into early
Yeah.
20s. I get what you're saying that that
That was
is
just
considered
much
an
weirder
adult.
this time around of like
hmm
I don't know. That was like yes, I still think it's healthier than the Mackeys, but I do think it was a very weird situation that I wish we had known more about. Like we don't get a
hmm
ton of time with her parents.
Right.
Because it's not really about them, but I do think it would have been interesting to dive a little bit deeper into them because
hmm
like there was a reason she wanted to run away too, and like yes, it was a little bit more happy-go-lucky and she had a lot more ties,
Yeah.
but like it was something where they did think she had legitimately run away and just never come back. Like, that's also
Mhm.
not good, you know?
And I mean, it does kind of play into the community perception of the place as well. Even
Yeah,
if Rosie was, leaving, because I do think there likely are a lot of young women who, grow up and they're like, I'm moving away to start a new life in LA or
right.
what have you. I do think a lot of that exists where you then have the parents that are like, okay, I guess this is happening. Whatever. She's running off to LA. She's going to be an actress. She's going to work in restaurants or what have you. I do think that type of thing exists. And so I, I do think, there is a little bit more of like a happy-go-lucky nature to the way that Rosie approached the situation of leaving, and that she was very much considering this as like, I'm going on an adventure.
Yes.
And versus Frank thinking, I'm getting out. I am finally going to be free,
Hmm.
that I'm not going to be tied down with my family. So a very different nature to that. But I also think it's interesting from that standpoint too of Rosie, like the parents may be feeling some shame for her picking up and leaving them in that way. So then they just don't talk about it. That
That's fair.
they're, embarrassed by what the community might think, that their daughter ran off to England and wants to work on the work in London or whatever.
Yeah.
So we're just never talking about her again. And it's like, we should have looked into this more, you people. Like, come on.
Yeah.
The
Saying she left
community
a
plays
note
a
and she
huge
never
role.
spoke to you in like 20 years.
Hmm.
Um,
The community plays such a huge role in the way that these people interact, and that they're just so held down by worrying what other people think of them.
yeah. There was something else I definitely wanted to talk a little bit more about, and I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. Um,
Was it the other cops?
no, I didn't really care about the other guys. We're about to. We have to follow along with them for two
Him
more books.
feeding him info because
I mean, this was the
he's
most
quote unquote
realistic of
not
like,
involved in the case.
I think Frank is the first cop we've met who's actually like good ethically for the
Yeah.
most part. Like he definitely had some gray lines, but
Hmm.
like he went on a leave of absence. He did what he was supposed to do.
Hmm.
Um, mhm.
Do we want to talk about the dad at all? Do you have anything to say about him?
I mean, I thought it was interesting. Oh, that's what I want to talk about. What did you think about the dad and the storyline of
Of
finding out that
Rosie's
Shay and
mom?
Frank had planned for his murder? Were
Oh,
you on Frank's side of I could have walked into any police station and I would get off scot-free and it meant nothing? Or were you with Shay of like you backed out?
oh, you mean do I think they should have carried out the murder?
No, not carried out the murder, but what did you think of like their that final discussion where they're like talking about it and Shay is like, you are trying to make amends for the bad things you did, and you're just as bad as I am, and like that discussion because like we do find out that they had gone pretty far in planning a murder. Like Shay
Hmm.
got the medication, they were figuring out how to dose people, like and then Frank talks about how Rosie was the one who saved him from having to go down that route, and he didn't think they would end up doing it, you know. But what did you think about that sudden kind of bait and switch at the end where we found that out?
Um, I was not surprised that there was something like that that existed in their minds, because I think when you're dealing with people who are in such a desperate situation, because Shay was desperate,
Hmm.
and it came off to me like even when they were talking about it, that the way that Frank kind of approached it was like, we should just kill him, that kind of thing, almost in a joking way. But Shay took it very seriously, and it became a thing that they started to roll with. And it made sense to me that Frank would get out of that and think, oh, we were never going to go through with it. Like,
Hmm.
I didn't think it was going to go this far. I can't believe you took it this seriously. And Shay to feel immense betrayal that Frank wouldn't want to carry this out. It all made a lot of sense. It was tragic that that even had to be considered by the two of them, that they were in such a desperate place in terms of their safety and their well-being, that they thought that that was an escape for them, which was
Yeah.
to murder their father. It's a very, very sad situation, but it did make sense to me.
Yeah. I always thought like it's one of those weird moments where Shay was like, "You were just as bad as I did. Like you and I both were there. You and I both were in it." And I always found it a little bit strange because when I was reading it, I was like, I understand why Shay feels betrayed, but at the same time, like Frank wasn't wrong. They could have gotten out at any moment, and like it
Mhm.
wasn't as quick of a turnaround as he thought it was, you know? And so, yeah, it's just,
I think it's a situation where the way that Shay saw it, they had to remove their dad from the picture. Their
yeah,
dad had to be gone in order for him to get out. And if their dad was still around, he didn't see a way of him getting out.
yeah,
And so that's where the betrayal comes into it versus Frank just thinking, why don't we just leave? We could just leave at any point. And Shay was very much tied to his father's presence
yeah,
there.
yeah. I think that's very fair. The dad is an interesting character. Yeah, he was a weird guy. Like
Hmm.
he just kind of,
You know, he was also a victim in his own way
yeah,
of poverty
yes,
and the system and community perception. You know, like all of these things played in the way that people judged him, the way that he was seen for how he was with Rosie's mom, the
hmm,
way that, he was kind of seen as less than for being someone who was always drinking.
yeah,
He was a victim in his own way too, and poverty was a huge thing. I think I almost I hate to like throw out things and make definitive statements, but I do feel like the statement like I got 99 problems and money could solve all of them.
105 of them.
Yeah,
Like,
I do feel like had he had money, I don't know that their family situation would have been the way it was. I don't know for sure. I can't say for sure. I don't like
yeah,
making definitives like that because you don't know for sure. And alcoholism is very complicated
yeah,
and often not tied to financial security.
no,
But I do feel like financial insecurity can lead people down dangerous paths and in towards things that are also unhealthy. And I do think a lot of his alcoholism, in my mind, seemed tied to the financial insecurity that he faced and how it then affected his family. And then it kind of snowballed into the mental illness that he suffered and the abuse that he inflicted on others. And it did seem like the poverty and the losing that job early on affected him in such a deep way that I want to say that, he's got 99 problems and money could fix all of them. It might have fixed a lot of them. It might have fixed a lot of them.
yeah. I don't know. I understand what you're saying from a poverty, and it does help people, and I do think that that is true. But from the discussions, and I understand like this was the 80s, so like more consistent work was hard to come by. But just the
Mhm.
discussions of the dad in general had me less likely to believe that just because they talk about like, well, when he had a good job, he would go and blow a lot of the money at the end of it. And he would start drinking gin and he would start doing
Mhm.
these things and not use it as like a jumping off point. And like that's not to say that I'm all for like people in poverty get to spend money on what they need to spend money on
Sure.
because we do not understand what goes into poverty. We do not understand
Mhm.
how difficult it is to go
He's
through the
also
day to
dealing with
day.
the disease, though.
Yeah.
He's dealing with
He
alcoholism.
was definitely an alcoholic, and I think he would have been an alcoholic, but like he did have that anger in him. Like when we see him talking to Frank, and he's talking about his life, there's just a lot of not just, he was just a very angry person. And I think
Mhm.
he was, to me, the read on him was just like there was a lot of deep-seated problems there that
Yeah.
I don't think even money could have helped. Because like Frank
I
talks
think
about
I
it
was
like
thinking more in terms of like their family situation
their family situation might have been helped.
that had he had stable work and been able to keep stable work and had more financial security, I do think likely their family situation would have been a lot better. But like I said, I don't like saying like definitive things like that because you
Yeah.
don't know. And he was dealing with disease.
Yeah.
So, but yes, he is dealing with so much trauma too. And he, is a victim of his community and the perceptions of other people and
Yeah.
feeling obligated to live up to certain standards, and also has so much bitterness in him
Yeah.
that, he is definitely one of those, well, the grass is always greener on the other side
Yes.
situations. But at the same time, I had to walk 5 miles uphill to school both
Both
ways.
ways.
You should have to also,
Yes.
type of people. So it's really difficult, but and we don't know too much about his past beyond just his like young adult life.
Right.
And so we don't know if this is a generational trauma situation. I would assume so, that we're dealing with somebody who likely had trauma as a child and was passing these things
Yeah,
down. I would assume. I don't know.
that's very
These
true.
things do not have to be like that, but it seems likely in this situation.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
And also, I'm like making all these statements. I We can't diagnose people. We don't know people's situations. These are fake characters, and we're just, analyzing a book.
Yeah.
So
We're just talking about a very complex book
these
on a
are all
podcast.
just personal
Um,
opinions. I don't know what solves people's problems. I don't know what can solve people's problems, but I do know if you got 99 problems, money can solve a lot of them because it
yeah,
can get you help
no,
if nothing else. I
yeah,
mean, uh, yeah.
no, I do agree with that. So,
And
um,
systemic issues are awful, and I wish that we were able to solve housing and poverty crises.
well, overall, what a deep, deep book
I love it so
into
much.
many a complicated topic. Um, well,
It's such a
Laura,
great book.
everyone just go read it. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think, do you have any final thoughts on Faithful Place?
No, I think I've talked ad nauseum at this
Okay,
point.
well, perfect. Well, for everyone, thank you for diving into Faithful Place. I want to remind you guys next week we will be having Moniquill Blackgoose on the pod. So we're very
Yay!
excited for that. And right after, we will be having Adam Bassett on February 3rd for Copper
Yay!
Skin, Oaken Lungs when it's released.
So good.
And then we'll be diving into Broken Harbor, but we also have a special announcement. This is very exciting and a little scary, but Laura and I have gotten the opportunity to host a live episode of the podcast
Yes.
in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Ever
Uh,
heard of it?
Ever heard of it? On February 15th, it is a Sunday, we will be having a live episode of the podcast at Dead Bird Brewing. It is a wonderful brewery that every third Sunday of the month does a book swap, and they asked us to come do a live episode there, and we said yes. So we are very excited for that.
Yeah, that'll be
Deadbird
awesome.
is very important to me. They have a lot of NA options. They're a vegan establishment, and they are where I had my rehearsal dinner before I got married. So I used to live by Deadbird, and they're a very important place. I think they're one of the first restaurants I went to when I moved to Milwaukee. So I'm very excited to
Cool.
host our first live episode there. So you should join us to
Yeah, if you're in the area, be
please
there.
come. I think we're ironing
What's
out
the
in
date of it?
times and all of those things, but February 15th is the day it
Hmm.
will be happening. And Lori and I have discussed that we will be covering a Star Wars book. What is it called, Laura? Is it
The
called
Courtship of Princess
The
Leia.
Courtship of Princess Leia, a 4-hour audiobook, if you ever heard one, and we'll just be kind of chit-chatting about that. And the episode should be released pending how it goes recording it on February 25th. So please stay tuned for that. If you're in the area, we'd love to see you. And
Yes.
yeah, just thank you to Deadbird for the opportunity. So, with that said, join us next week, like I said. And while you are at it, please rate, review, and subscribe. Rating, reviewing, and subscribing is a great way to get other people to the podcast.
Yeah, get them
And
in the
we
mix.
definitely appreciate it. You can also follow us at OWWR Pod on the social media platforms we exist on: Blue Sky, TikTok, and Instagram, or you can always email us at ourpod@gmail.com, join our Discord, and head on over to ourpod.com for our
Lots
recent.
of author interviews over
We
there.
we have an author highlight this week, Amy Koza, who wrote The Warm Machine, a robot romance. Who
Oh, I love
doesn't want
it.
to read about that? And it is so cute. I've read the first couple chapters,
Oh,
loved every second of it. So everyone head on over to hear me talk to Amy. she's a wonderful illustrator. She included some of her artwork on there, so please
Oh,
check that
awesome.
out. And we hope that you listened to our TV Tuesday yesterday on People We
Yeah.
Meet on Vacation. We loved
If you
that
haven't,
movie.
go back. And
Go
then
back. It's worth
also
it.
watch People Meet on Vacation again. Let's ruin Netflix's algorithms.
I know.
All of them.
It's so funny because we recorded that episode. Now my TikTok is blowing up with People We Meet on Vacation discussions
Good.
and how small spoilers, jump 5 seconds or just, end the podcast today and come back next week. But they were talking about how, like, well, Puppy and Alex definitely cheated on that trip. And I was like, Lord, I did not talk about that because we were just so relieved that Sarah was treated with a modicum of decency.
Yeah.
So
We're willing to overlook some things.
we are willing to overlook infidelity if it means that Hannah doesn't have to read about a vasectomy. So but it was a great episode. I enjoy talking with you about it. We have some great TV Tuesdays coming down the pipeline. So lots to look forward to in
Yeah.
2026.
And thanks for listening today. We really appreciate it.
Yep. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.